Welcome to the deep dive. So for our session today, we're not going to be trying to predict market movements, what's going up or down.
That's not the goal here at all.
Instead, we're digging into the sources you've shared with us, and we're looking at something a bit more curious.
Uh-huh.
We're trying to understand the actual mechanism, the process by which the financial system decides what not to pay attention to.
And how fast it makes that decision.
Exactly. It's like we're observing the velocity of ignored risk. I mean, if you've been following things for the last few years, this will sound very familiar to you. There's this rotating cast of major global worries.
Oh, absolutely. They're constants now.
Right. The sources point to them all the time. You've got geopolitical flare-ups. You have this kind of structural fatigue in big economies, political gridlock.
Don't forget the inflation and tightening cycle that just never seems to end.
And the fragile supply chains, they're part of the background noise now.
They are. And look, risk itself isn't new. That's not the interesting part. What your source is really zeroing in on is how uniform the responses become.
The pattern.
The pattern, yes. Some bad news hits, or maybe an old worry gets a little worse. The market has a little wobble.
Sometimes for just a few hours.
A few hours, maybe a day.
Yeah.
And then almost instantly, that whole narrative machine just kicks into high gear.
Ah, yes. The declaration that comes so quickly.
Instantly. It's either already priced in, or it's contained, or, my favorite, the impact is limited.
And just like that, it's back to this surface level calm.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Those phrases, limited impact, contained, they used to be the result of an analysis.
The conclusion you'd reach at the end.
Exactly. But now, it feels like they're the starting point. They're the script that has to be read before everyone is allowed to move on.
And that's really what we're looking at in this deep dive. We're not here to judge if the market is right or wrong.
No, that's not the point. We're just observing how the system is working, how it's functioning right now.
So the central question that the sources bring up, the one that creates the sort of shared discomfort, is this. When everything gets calm again so fast, has the risk actually been resolved?
Or has it just been pushed aside, pushed outside the operating speed of the whole mechanism?
That's the key distinction, isn't it? Resolution versus exclusion by speed. Let's talk about that shared observation, because that's where you can really see this happening.
You really can.
The bad news, it definitely still shows up, but the system's reaction time, it's gotten incredibly short.
Almost unnaturally short.
A perfect example, and the sources mention this a lot, is a regional conflict flares up or some major economic number comes in way worse than expected. The commentators, they have to mention it.
I can't just ignore it.
No, but the mention is immediately followed by this protective phrase. It's always, well, this is a concern, but for now, the impact seems limited.
Or it appears contained and hasn't expanded. That's the other one.
And if you just look at the prices themselves, the market action backs that up completely. You get these sharp little dips that look terrifying on a chart for maybe a day or two.
Right, but they never seem to turn into real sustained fear. It's not that deep panic that makes people rethink everything from the ground up.
The reaction is just a flash in the pan. The bad thing happens, but the fear, the selling, the actual concern, it's put out with this incredible efficiency.
Which brings us to that friction point you mentioned. We have to ask why the calm returns so quickly. I mean, does that speed really suggest the underlying problem is solved?
Is it some kind of amazing institutional confidence? Are they telling us the system is just that resilient now?
But that's hard to square with the idea of structural fatigue, isn't it? If governments and central banks are already stretched thin.
Right. It starts to sound less like confidence and more like, well, denial. Or maybe just exhaustion, like they don't have the energy to deal with it.
And that's where the sources suggest we should maybe look at this differently. What if it's not resolution at all? What if it feels more like the news story has just vanished from the conversation?
Regardless of whether the facts on the ground have changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, then it's not about what the risk is. It's all about how quickly the system learns to ignore it.
So the system isn't actually safer. It's just gotten much, much faster at looking away.
That's the argument. And it brings us to this idea of a structural shift. It's not that there's less risk in the world.
It's that the velocity of ignoring it has gone way up.
Precisely. The speed with which judgment is just excluded from the whole process. The system is literally moving faster than the threats. What you're seeing is the acceleration of omission.
Wow. Accelerated omission. That suggests the market has basically installed kind of bypass. a huge filter on its own brain.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So instead of taking the time to ask, okay, is this geopolitical event dangerous for the next 5 years?
It skips that question entirely.
Because it's too slow. Instead, it runs a much faster, much simpler calculation, something almost algorithmic.
It asks one thing. Should this immediately reflect in the price? Is there an immediate threat to trading, to liquidity, right now?
And if the answer to that can't be found in, 24, maybe 48 hours?
It's filtered out. It gets skipped.
And the consequences of that kind of high-speed filter must be huge for certain types of problems.
They're profound because any risk that is naturally slow-moving or cumulative just doesn't register.
It falls right through the cracks.
Think of it like your house. You might have a tiny, slow leak in the foundation, another one in the attic.
The slow burn problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But because there's no water actively spraying across your living room floor right now, the high-speed system decides there's no problem. The leaks aren't fixed. They're just not part of the immediate calculation.
So the system's greatest strength, its speed, is also its biggest weakness. It's optimized to ignore anything that isn't an immediate fire.
And the sources point to things like, long-term national debt or supply chain problems that take months to actually show up on shelves, or even just institutional fatigue where regulators are just worn out.
These things aren't being solved, they're just being skipped over.
Because they don't move fast enough to trigger the price alarm. So it becomes a process of judgment omission. It's all driven by the need for speed.
That's a pretty startling thought, that the system is now less about reducing risk and more about accelerating its own processing.
The decisions have to be made before a real beep evaluation can even start.
And that changes how we feel, doesn't it? It creates a kind of psychological environment.
It absolutely does. It leads to what the sources call a normalization of ignoring, a shortcutting an explanation. And when that's the default mode, it really changes how we perceive reality itself.
I think that's why this whole idea resonates so deeply. You can feel this shift happening, even if you don't quite have the words for it. You sense that you're being rushed past the important details.
Yes. And let's bring this back to you, the listener, and what that feeling is. If the system's default is always to skip the deep thinking and just give a short explanation, it doesn't actually make you feel secure.
No, it doesn't lead to real reassurance.
Instead, you end up in that really strange state of mind where you think, okay, I don't feel reassured because I know the problem is still out there.
But I'm not really panicking either because the market seems fine.
Exactly. You're just left with this persistent, low-level hum of unease.
The sources have a name for that hum, right? For that specific feeling.
They do. They talk about an accumulation of unlanguaged dissonance. Sometimes they use the Japanese term iwakan. It's this sense that things are just slightly out of place, fundamentally off.
So that feeling that the story you're being told and the reality you're sensing, they don't quite match up.
That's it, exactly.
Can you give us a concrete example of what that iwakan would feel like? Is it like you read that a huge, important bank has failed, but then the market rallies because the story is that the failure was contained and idiosyncratic, and you're just left feeling weird about the whole thing?
That is a perfect example. It's when a piece of news that really should trigger deep concern is treated like it's just noise, and the whole system moves on way too fast.
And when that happens over and over again,
we lose the ability to even explain why we're uneasy. We might feel that something big could be happening, but we don't have the words for it because the official high-speed narrative has already declared everything is fine.
So the system has basically stopped asking us to decide if we should be worried.
The speed of the omission, it sets the mood for us. We're just along for the ride on this high-velocity filter. We're operating on what you could call a speed gradient.
Where the pace of transactions is so fast, it just outruns our ability to think about long-term value.
Right. Which, of course, brings us to the final point. Under what conditions does this process have to change? Because a system built on the velocity of omission, that can't be stable forever.
It feels inherently fragile.
It is. Because all those problems being skipped are still there. They're still building up pressure under the surface. And the sources point to two main ways this whole thing could break.
The first being, if those ignored slow speed risks, the debt, the political divisions, if they suddenly show up in the real world.
In a non-price form. Things that you can't ignore, things that hit you outside of a financial model.
So an actual institutional breakdown. A key part of the government just stops functioning.
Or a real disruption to daily life. A supply chain failure so bad that store shelves are empty for months. Something you can see and feel on the street, not just on a trading screen. If that happens, the filter fails.
And what's the second condition?
The second one is internal. It's if that priced-in narrative itself just stops working.
What would that look like?
It would look like the market just freezing up, a sudden inability to move up or down, even when big news hits, a kind of inexplicable rigidity. That would be a sign that the whole mechanism for ignoring things has just been overloaded. It's broken down.
So until one of those things happens.
The sources suggest this gradient, this acceleration of omission, it just keeps running. It's the environment we're in right now.
Which leaves us, and you, with one final critical thought to reflect on from this deep dive. If the speed of exclusion is what's creating this shared sense of calm,
Are we as a collective calmer because the world is actually a safer place to be?
or is it because the mechanism we use for critical judgment itself?
Has simply been accelerated away from us.
Thank you for sharing your sources and for joining us in this reflective deep dive.